Hi, I'm Dustin Abbott, and I'm here today to give you a first look at Tamron's newest lens. This is the 70-210mm f4 DI VC USD. Now, if you don't speak Tamron, let me give you a quick breakdown of what that means. DI means that this is a full frame compatible lens, although it will also work fine on APS-C. It has Tamron's VC, which is vibration compensation, which is the name of their technology for stabilization built into the lens. Then finally, it has a USD or ultrasonic drive focus motor into it. And so this lens, of course, is going to go head-to-head with first-party offerings from Canon and Nikon, and does have a little bit of an advantage just in the basic makeup, in that in times past there have been 80 to 210 millimeter lenses, there have been 70 to 200 millimeter lenses, but very few 70 to 210 millimeter lenses. And so, you could say, well, it's not much, 10 millimeters. It's not, but it may be enough for someone who wants just that extra little bit of reach, just enough to set Tamron apart here. So probably a pretty smart marketing ploy. Now, we've seen in recent years, last year and a half basically, that Sigma and Tamron have started to challenge the status quo of other first-party lenses outside of kind of the traditional, larger aperture zoom lenses or prime lenses. We've seen that they've also started to go after some of the maybe more commercial zoom market. Now, in this case, the new Tamron is going up against what I think is one of Canon's underrated lenses. A lot of people, when they're looking at the 70 to 200 focal length, they jump right past the f4 options and they have gone right to, f2.8 options. But I think that Canon's own 70 to 200 millimeter f4 LIS is actually a pretty fantastic lens. But as we're going to see, this lens goes up against that one and has a couple of extra tricks up its sleeve to help it to compete. First of all is looking at the price. This lens is coming to market with an MSRP in the US of $799. That compares very, very favorably to Canon's MSRP of the 70 to 200 f4L IS USM lens of $1199. I think at the moment you might be able to get it for $1099 in the US market. But either way, we're talking between a $300 to $400 price advantage for a lens that basically offers everything and perhaps a bit more than what the Canon does. I would say that the design of this Tamron lens, it has, it has an excellent build quality here. It does have, it's a mix of metal alloys and then also, I think, some engineered plastics. It's not quite as high-end a build as what either the G2 zooms are or the SP primes that are all like an aluminum frame. And so you can tell that there are some engineered plastics mixed in there, but at the same time, this is a very nicely built lens, complete with weather sealing. It has flooring coating at the front, and so, byproduct, there's a lot of good stuff that goes into the design. I will note, just looking at the physical design for a moment, that it has kind of a satin type finish. One thing about this, and I find it to actually be particularly true, although it's true also in the kind of the aluminum bodies, and that you will see fingerprints on it. But what I do find on these type bodies is that they're a little bit more likely to show also some, marks, either from, rub marks or bags. And so, they've gone away from kind of the flocked type exterior that a lot of lenses use, and of course that Canon still employs a lot of times. The look of the lenses is better when they're new. It's kind of a sleeker look, but I think on a practical level, that flocked type look also helps to resist against, marks and, scratches, whatever along the way. So anyway, pros and cons either way. In terms of the actual physical dimensions of this lens, as you can see, I've got the Tamron 70-200 f2.8 G2 lens here. The G2 lens is obviously much larger. It's physically much larger. It's also considerably heavier. This comes in at 1.5 kilos compared to 859 grams for the f4 edition here, and that's 1.89 pounds. And so it definitely comes in, not quite half the weight, but you're looking at about 60% of the weight, and so a 40% weight savings going with the f4 edition. A lot of people will find these days is that while an f4 is not a particular sexy maximum aperture, that for a lot of people, they will find that f4 is actually sufficient. In terms of depth of field is already quite shallow even at f4, particularly when you're looking at the longer end of this focal length. So it's still quite easy to get nice separation of your subject from the background in a lot of situations due to the nature of the focal length. The other thing there is that yes, it has half the light gathering potential of an f2.8 lens. But the trade-off these days is that, modern DSLR bodies have really great high ISO performance. And so, byproduct of that is that in a lot of venues, you can get away with an f4 maximum aperture. And so, of course, for those of you that are looking for a much lighter, a more compact lens, easier to travel with, and then also combine that with a lens that's significantly less expensive, there may be a winning formula for a lot of people there. Now, just out of the box, both lenses obviously come with a lens hood. A couple of things that aren't included is that tripod collar. This is actually the one from the G2 here, is included with the f2.8 version. But like Canon's 70-200 f4 LIS, it is not included on the f4. Fortunately, one is available as an option if you want to add that on as an accessory. And one advantage of the Tamron tripod collars over the Canon ones is that they are Arca Swiss compatible, meaning that you can go very likely right onto your tripod in a lot of situations without having to use a quick release plate. And so that certainly is a nice design feature of Tamron's tripod collars. But note that that is an additional accessory if you're going to want that. It also doesn't come with any kind of included case or pouch with the lens. And so that's another thing that if that's important to you, you're going to need to provide separately. Physical dimensions as compared to the Canon lens is that the Tamron lens is the exact same diameter, right under 3 inches, 2.99 inches, or 76 millimeters. It takes a very common 67 millimeter front filter thread, which is nice because that's shared with the new Tamron 100-400. It's shared with basically the whole SP Prime series to this date, including the 35 millimeter, 45 millimeter, 85 millimeter, and I believe even the 90 millimeter f2.8 macro also has a 67 millimeter front filter thread. And so great news there is if you're kind of buying Tamron right now, you can buy one filter size and share it across the lineup. Pretty nice there. Now, in terms of the length, the Tamron is not only a little bit heavier than the Canon lens, it's 859 grams versus 760 grams. It's also a little bit longer. It's 6.9 inches compared to 6.77 inches on the Canon. And so that's a difference of 175 millimeters to 172 millimeters. Not significant, obviously, not enough to change really anything, but the Tamron is a little bit larger and a little bit heavier. Of course, it also has 10 extra millimeters of focal length, and it has a build quality that is, very comparable as well, high grade of build also. Now, to look at a few other things where these kind of trade off, is that another advantage that the Tamron has is that it has the ability to focus down considerably closer than the Canon does. The Canon is right under a 4-foot minimum focus distance, 1.2 meters. Meanwhile, this can focus down to 3.12 feet or under a meter, 95 centimeters. That combined with an extra 10 millimeters of focal length makes a pretty significant difference when it comes to the maximum magnification, which in the case of the Tamron is 0.32 times. That's a 1 to 3.1 reproduction ratio. Very, very useful, very nice. And that's compared to the Canon, which has a 0.21 times magnification or a 1 to 5 reproduction ratio. For some reason, that blows away what the G2 version is able to achieve. It doesn't even reach the 0.20 times magnification level. In fact, this is it's not far off from double the reproduction ratio. So one thing you can take away from that, in that, yes, there's I think a minor difference in the minimum focus distance. 3.11, no, it has the exact same minimum focus distance. So one thing that tells me is that this lens, unlike this lens, is not prone to focus breathing. And so you retain that full, actual focal length even when you're coming up close to your subject. So, score another one there for Tamron, not only over Canon, but also over the more expensive G2 version. Now, comparing the Canon and the Tamron in terms of the optical formula, we're looking at a quite similar optical formula. Both have 20 elements. Canon has 15 groups, Tamron has 14 groups. Another minor variation is that the Canon has 8 rounded aperture blades. The Tamron has, kind of the more modern standard of 9 rounded aperture blades. Both of them, of course, have image stabilization, or VC in the case of the Tamron. One advantage, however, for the Tamron is that I actually found the IS on the Canon. I owned it for a number of years. I actually found it to be quite good. And I've got a number of, 1/15 handheld shots that were just fine. But it is far from being a quiet image stabilization. Meanwhile, if we, let's lock focus here, and there's a good chance that you're not hearing anything right now. And that is because it's only with my ear right up next to the actual lens that I'm able to hear a very light whirring inside with the VC at work. Meanwhile, the Canon, it sounds like there are some angry bees that are trapped inside the lens barrel when the IS is functioning. And so, Canon's is effective, but it's not a smooth or quiet. So if you're a video shooter or shooting in a quiet environment, Tamron's definitely got an advantage there. Now, in terms of the focus speed, I would say that the Canon actually has the faster focus speed, and this is fine. I'm shooting in quite low light conditions in here, and so even in low light outside of, there's bright light on me and very low light in the rest of the room, it's not having a problem locking, but it's not instant in focusing, whereas the Canon focuses a little bit faster. What my take is on what's happening here is that I've already used it some via adapter on a Sony A7 III, A7R III, and then also, of course, these days, Canon's own DPAF is definitely a kind of focus mechanism that a lot of people are going to employ when using this lens. So, I think the byproduct of this is that this is a lens that actually works quite well, both with phase detect or viewfinder, and then also contrast AF, which is what like live view is on a Canon. And while Sony bodies are doing a phase detect also, the way that it operates is in terms of the focus behavior is a little bit more also like contrast AF. So I think that Tamron, of course, has had to design this lens with the realization that people are going to use, servo AF in video. And so a lot of like Canon USM lenses, they're quite loud during, any kind of servo work. You can just hear, whirring and clicking. And then also, via adapter, it's the same kind of thing. So this lens is working quite well in both of those venues. And taking it out, I've already taken it out some, like with the new Sony A7 III and say the Sigma MC11 adapter. I got pretty good focus results, and I got very, very good focus accuracy. That's never an issue. Focus accuracy is exceptional with the adapter, but I also got fairly good focus, speed under that situation. Not quite native, mount focus speed, but not far off. And so anyway, it's a good kind of hybrid lens, and so that makes it an interesting lens for those that might consider that. Because this is also a focal length that Sony doesn't really have a lot of great options at reasonable prices. And so, another set of pluses there. The lens itself, in terms of the features, it has just the AF, MF, VC on and off switches, kind of your basic switches. So, and I believe that that's similar to what Canon has also. So what you're not seeing here is any kind of focus limiter, nor are you seeing different modes for the VC. Now, this is compatible with Tamron's tap-in console, so you can tweak autofocus, deliver firmware updates. But the other thing is that you can tweak the behavior of the VC according to your priorities in the tap-in console. So while it doesn't have different modes on here, know that you can alter that behavior by using the tap-in. As is pretty typical with Tamrons, the actual zoom and focus direction is similar to Nikon and other such lenses. It is opposite of Canon. And so if you're a Canon shooter and it's your first go with a Tamron lens, note that that may be an issue for you. This is a completely internally focusing and internally zooming lens, and the actual zoom ring, which is towards the front, is beautiful. It moves just super well damped, nice and easy, no hang-ups. It feels like, you know, the very, very best Canon L series lenses. That's good. The actual focus ring, it also moves nice and easy. No problem there. I don't like the feel of it. It's a more shallowly ribbed focus ring, and I think that may be intentional design in that the feel of it is very different than the focus ring, which will help, you know, just in a tactile sense to differentiate between the two rings as you become familiar with the lens to make sure you're grabbing the right thing. I just don't like the feel of it quite as well as what I do the focus ring. The zoom ring feels a little bit more premium. It's more deeply ribbed as compared to the focus ring itself. Not really any kind of significant thing to complain about. All in all, it seems like Tamron has checked a lot of the boxes here. Early image quality. I'm going to delve more deeply into the image quality, obviously, but image quality looks really, really nice from this lens, which I'm not at all surprised by. Tamron's been kind of nailing image quality with a lot of these lenses, but great contrast, wide open, excellent sharpness from what I can tell. I haven't tested corner sharpness yet, but in terms of, so far to this point, I've just been shooting with the lens. But in terms of the subjects that I'm shooting, it's delivering really beautiful results, and so no complaints there. Excellent price. Autofocus, I don't think is Canon L series worthy, but it's not far behind, and I'll test how it works for some tracking as well. All in all, I think that Tamron has got the ingredients for a great lens. Now we're going to really, you know, drill down here and get at the details, the nitty-gritty on the lens, and I'll be reporting back to you with that. In the meantime, take a look in the image gallery down below. There's a link in the description, and that will take you to an image gallery, and I'm adding lots of images. I will throw it, I'll be shooting with it on 5D Mark IV. I'll throw it a little bit on an 80D to give you some APS-C results, and then obviously I'm also throwing it some on some Sony bodies to see how it behaves there for those of you that are looking at it from that end. And I'll report all of that back to you as a part of this process. Look in the description. You can also sign up for my newsletter, which I highly encourage you to do so. You can become a patron, follow me on social media, and of course, if you haven't already, please click that subscribe button. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.